Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. We're going to dive deep under the hood of literally the most complex, fascinating machine in the known universe. I'm talking about the human brain. Just think about it for a second. Right now, inside your head, you have roughly 86 billion neurons, and they are firing constantly in this incredibly intricate symphony just to create the very experience of you. Today, we're going to zero in and demystify one of its absolute most incredible functions, human memory. We are going to explore exactly how it works, why it seemingly fails us all the time, and most importantly, we'll equip you with practical, science-backed tools to not only enhance your memory right this second, but to protect it for the rest of your life.
So let me ask you a question. Have you ever confidently walked into a room, stopped dead in your tracks, and completely forgotten why you went in there in the first place? Or, maybe you've misplaced your phone for the 5th time this week. If you're not in your head right now, trust me, you are not alone. The neuroscientist Lisa Genova actually says that people constantly corner her at parties just to confess these exact panic-inducing moments of everyday forgetting. They're terrified that it's an early sign of cognitive decline.
But honestly, here is a massive sigh of relief for you. It is not your memory failing, it's your attention. We tend to think our memory is like a video camera constantly recording everything around us, or like a passive computer hard drive, just waiting quietly to store data by default. It's not. If you don't actively pay attention to exactly where you put your glasses down, your brain never even encodes that information. You literally cannot retrieve a memory that was never formed in the first place. So when you lose your glasses, it's almost always a symptom of distraction. It is not dementia.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today.
First, the mechanics of memory. Second, why we actually forget. Third, the secrets of memory champions. And fourth, protecting your brain.
Let's jump right into part 1, the mechanics of memory.
So right off the bat, there's a really clear division in how our memory operates. We actually have different forms of memory functioning on vastly different timescales. I mean, we're talking sensory memory lasting mere milliseconds, all the way to long-term memory spanning decades. But the really massive distinction here exists between declarative and non-declarative memory. Non-declarative memory is your automatic stuff. It's your muscle memory. When you hop on a bicycle, you don't have to consciously think about how to balance or pedal, right? Your motor cortex and your basal ganglia just automatically take over. But our focus today is entirely on declarative memory. This is the stuff you can consciously declare out loud to the world. It includes your episodic memory, which is the rich, vivid story of your life, and your semantic memory, which encompasses cold, hard facts and data. And declarative memory relies heavily on one very specific biological structure.
That structure is the hippocampus, which is nestled right deep within the temporal lobe. Its name actually comes from the Greek word for seahorse, because, funny enough, when you isolate it, it looks exactly like a little seahorse. Now, we really need to dispel a huge myth right here. Your memories are not stored in a neatly organized file cabinet, and they aren't chapters on a DVD menu. If you think about, say, Mickey Mouse, the visual image of him lives way back in your occipital cortex, but the sound of his high-pitched, squeaky voice lives way over in your auditory cortex. They aren't stored together at all. Instead, the hippocampus is the brain's memory weaver. In a fraction of a millisecond, it binds those widely separated sights, sounds, and emotions into one singular, reconstructed neural circuit. It acts like this incredibly fast master index, allowing your brain to instantly reconstruct the entire event later on demand.
To actually pull this off, memory formation has to go through 4 crucial steps. Step 1 is encoding. This is translating raw sights and sounds into neurological language. Step 2 is consolidation, physically linking that initially unrelated neural activity into a newly connected pattern. Step 3 is storage, basically locking it in through long-lasting changes in your neuroanatomy. And step 4 is retrieval, intentionally reactivating the circuit. At the cellular level, this whole shebang relies on synaptic plasticity, specifically something called long-term potentiation, or LTP. I want you to think of LTP like walking through a fresh, deeply snowy field. The very first time you try to walk across, it is incredibly tough and super slow. But the more times you walk that exact same path, the deeper and more permanent the trail becomes. In the brain, repeated activation of neurons strengthens their synaptic connections over time, making that specific neural path so much easier to travel in the future.
Now, let's actually trace the literal flow of information through the hippocampal formation via what neuroscientists call the trisynaptic circuit. Imagine tracking the memory of your first kiss. The sensory information, like the feeling of the breeze, the smell of their perfume, enters from the cortex right through the entorhinal cortex. Then it flows to the dentate gyrus, which performs something called pattern separation. That basically means it ensures the memory of this specific kiss doesn't accidentally overwrite a memory of a hug you had yesterday. It keeps it distinct. Then the signal moves to the CA3 region, which is super cool. It acts like a search engine's autocompleter, linking all the elements together so you can initiate a full recall later from just partial cue. Like when you catch a whiff of that exact same perfume years later and the whole memory floods back, that's CA3. The signal then moves to CA1, which refines the memory and constantly compares it to incoming sensory info. Finally, it hits the subiculum, which is the main distribution hub that sends the signal all the way back out to the cerebral cortex to be stored and stabilized as a permanent piece of your personal history.
Moving on to part 2, why we actually forget.
Here's the thing. Our brains are exceptionally good at remembering what is highly meaningful, super emotional, totally surprising, or completely new. But they are notoriously terrible at these same old, same old. Lisa Genova shares this fantastic anecdote about driving over the massive 4-lane Sagamore Bridge in Massachusetts, only to realize 20 miles later that she had absolutely zero conscious memory of ever crossing it. Her eyes were wide open, her muscle memory drove the car perfectly, but because her daily commute was so repetitive and so familiar, her attention was completely elsewhere. She was probably deep in thought or lost in an audiobook, and without active attention to novelty, the experience just vanished without a trace. It was never encoded to begin with.
This biological quirk perfectly explains one of our most notorious, embarrassing failures, forgetting names. Seriously, have you ever wondered why you can so easily recognize a face from across the room but completely blank on their name? Welcome to the Baker-Baker paradox. See, if you meet someone whose last name is Mr. Baker, that's just an abstract concept. It lives in a neurological cul-de-sac. There's literally only one path in to retrieve it, and if that path is blocked by stress or distraction, you're stuck. But if you meet someone and learn that they are a baker by profession, well, that lives at a bustling neurological intersection. Instantly, you picture white flour on an apron, a wooden spatula, the incredible smell of fresh apple pie, maybe that corner bakery you loved as a kid. There are countless roads leading to that memory. So the ultimate secret to remembering names is to force associations onto them to build more roads. The next time you meet a Mr. Baker, consciously, intentionally picture him wearing a giant, floppy white chef's hat. You are consciously building a memorable intersection.
Then there's prospective memory. This is your brain's everyday to-do list, like remembering to pick up milk on the way home or to take your medication at exactly 8 p.m. Honestly, our brains are simply not designed to do this well. We require a clear, obvious cue at the exact right time and place. Otherwise, the whole system just fails. So if you ever feel bad or guilty about constantly writing down a to-do list, please don't. Airline pilots do not rely on their brains to lower the landing gear. They outsource that absolutely vital job to a written checklist. Highly trained, brilliant surgeons use checklists so they don't accidentally leave instruments inside patients. Writing things down isn't cheating your memory. It is a totally biologically sound practice that frees up your brain's processing power to do what it actually does best.
Let's look at part 3, secrets of memory champions.
Have you ever heard of a memory palace? This is this ancient, mind-blowing technique that memory champions use to memorize thousands of random digits or entire decks of perfectly shuffled cards. Nelson Dellis, who is a multiple-time memory champion, explains that our brains are evolutionarily wired to remember highly visual, emotional things and exactly where they are physically located in space. Think about it. Our ancient hunter-gatherer ancestors didn't really need to remember abstract lists of numbers, but they absolutely needed to remember the exact spatial location of a poisonous plant or a life-saving watering hole in order to survive. The memory palace literally hacks this oldest survival hardware. To memorize numbers, Nelson turns them into absurd images and mentally places them along a familiar physical route. For example, to remember the digits 7049, he literally imagines the cartoon character Goku from Dragon Ball Z catching a football right at the entrance of a specific hotel lobby in Kathmandu that he once visited. The pure, utter absurdity of the image, combined with the hardwired spatial awareness, makes abstract information basically unforgettable.
Now, you might not need to memorize thousands of digits of pi anytime soon, but you can definitely use these champion hacks in your everyday life. First off, write your notes by hand. The physical, deliberate act forces you to be intentional and present, which lays down a much stronger neural trace than just passive, mindless typing. Second, space out your study sessions. Studying for 1 hour a day over a week is scientifically far superior to cramming for 7 hours straight the night before. Third, self-test bidirectionally using flashcards. Look, simply rereading a textbook only drives one way down the neural highway. Forcing yourself to pull the answer out of your brain builds a bidirectional superhighway that fundamentally strengthens the entire circuit. Also, here's a crazy tip. Try to match your context.
If you study while drinking dark roast coffee and smelling a lavender candle, you'll actually recall that information far better if you take the test under those exact same sensory conditions. Okay, we desperately need to address a modern trap right now. We all love to think we are fantastic multitaskers. We are not. True multitasking is a total, complete myth for 97.5% of the population. What we are actually doing is rapid task switching. And every single time you switch your attention from reading a dense document to checking a quick ping on your phone, your brain pays a seriously steep cognitive cost just to rebuild the context of what you were just doing. In fact, research shows it can take around 23 whole minutes for your brain to fully regain its deep focus after a single distraction. This constant context shifting utterly destroys the deep attention that is absolutely required for successful memory encoding. Unless you are doing a physical dual task, like, say, walking on a treadmill while listening to an explainer, trying to do two mental tasks at once guarantees you will do both poorly and remember neither.
And finally, part 4, protecting your brain. First things first, let's relieve some major anxiety by clearly contrasting normal forgetting with actual Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's begins with this sticky protein called amyloid beta slowly accumulating into plaques in the brain. And this silent buildup actually takes 15 to 20 years before any noticeable symptoms even show up. Normal forgetting is, coming out of a busy mall and not remembering if you parked on level 3 or level 4 because you were distracted by texting and just didn't pay attention. Alzheimer's is walking right up to your own car and not recognizing it as yours at all. Normal forgetting is misplacing your keys somewhere in the house. Alzheimer's is finding your keys right in your hand and no longer knowing what they are actually used for. Alzheimer's aggressively attacks the hippocampus first, which is exactly why the tragic inability to form new memories is the primary early symptom of the disease. But here is a massive, deeply empowering statistic. For 98% of us, Alzheimer's is not some predetermined genetic destiny. It is heavily, heavily influenced by our daily lifestyle choices. Adopting a Mediterranean diet, eating that vibrant rainbow of leafy greens, berries, and fatty fish provides your neurons with the exact antioxidants they need to fight cellular inflammation. Now, combine that with regular aerobic exercise, like just taking a brisk 30-minute walk 4 to 5 times a week. That massively increases your blood flow and delivers vital oxygen directly to the hippocampus. Doing just these 2 things alone can reduce your risk of developing Alzheimer's by 1/3 to 1/2. That is wild. That is literally as effective as any magical pharmaceutical pill we could ever hope to invent.
Let's quickly run through this ultimate brain protection checklist. Deep sleep is completely non-negotiable. When you sleep, your glial cells literally act as the brain's nighttime sanitation department. They actively clear away the day's metabolic debris, including sweeping away those toxic amyloid beta plaques. Chronic sleep deprivation means that toxic plaque simply builds up day after day. Next up is fiercely managing your stress. Chronic psychological stress constantly floods your body with cortisol, and over time, cortisol literally shrinks your hippocampus and completely stops new neurons from forming. It damages the very core of your memory engine. But studies remarkably show that just 90 seconds of slow, deep breathing through your nose or practicing regular yoga and meditation can physically restore the size of your hippocampus by actively lowering those toxic cortisol levels.
Which brings us to our final, beautiful takeaway today. Even if you have some amyloid plaques slowly building up in your brain as you age, you can actively outsmart the disease by building what's called a cognitive reserve. Every single time you learn a new skill, read a challenging new book, or engage in a complex new hobby, you are creating brand new redundant neural synapses. So if Alzheimer's eventually blocks one pathway, your brain simply takes a detour around the roadblock through the rich, expansive network of new roads you've consciously built. I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Your memory is not a static given. It's a dynamic muscle you can actively train and protect. So what new thing will you learn today to build your cognitive reserve? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.